Ultimately, I really believe in humanity. And I believe it is an absolutely incredible and gorgeous thing to be a human being on this planet. And I suppose where I would go with that is, I know that it's easy right now for people to look around and go, holy crap, we're doomed. And I know people close to me who are, in my vicinity on a regular basis, that when they get a chance to express something like that, that certainly comes out of their mouths. Now, a couple years ago, when the coronavirus pandemic started, you remember that? Remember those days? Remember when the lockdowns were happening here in the US? I know that there are still lockdowns someplace on this planet, particularly China. But for us here in the US, we've largely relaxed, the coronavirus restrictions. Some people choose to wear masks. There are some environments in which precautions are certainly more warranted. But during those early days, it was just, for me, a really interesting experience of all of this external stuff going down on the planet. And while it was starting to happen, I was receiving information. It took me a long time, and with the help of my human design body graph, I began to recognize that one of my particular gifts is receiving and organizing vast amounts of unusual information. And when I say vast amounts, I mean it's not just from one system, and even when I do explore one system, I tend to absorb a lot of it. I'm not always categorizing it. I just want to absorb it. I can feel the stream as I'm intaking this energy, and it feels like nourishment from the cosmos. Around the time that the coronavirus pandemic was starting to go down, actually what happened was in December of 2019, I started receiving this information. And while my husband and I were on a trip to Thailand in December and into early January, we started seeing and hearing reports of this virus that was going around. And we even knew a few people while we were in Thailand who came down with some severe respiratory, flu-like, cold-like symptoms. And we still wonder whether that was actually COVID at the time. By the time that we got back to the US and we were flying out of Asia back home, the reports were, they were becoming more and more frequent, and there was more information coming about this potential contagion. But at that time, we still thought that maybe it would be confined to Asia or countries that weren't the US, right? We were naive, we didn't know. By the time the coronavirus pandemic was in full swing and lockdowns began in the US, I had received a body of information that led me to a feeling of, oh, this is what they were talking about. This is it. This is right on time according to this information that I just received. And so I wasn't scared. Now, I will say that my husband at the time was still going through intensive cancer treatment. He was considered immunocompromised. We were still making regular visits, sometimes weekly, to various doctors and medical professionals to have treatments and testing done for his cancer treatment. And if there was any fear on my part, it was fear on his behalf. I did not want to personally be responsible for allowing him to contract the coronavirus and have any kind of issues with that, because he had cancer tumors in his lungs and he had some invasive lung treatments, including cryotherapy in one of his lungs, that left him very vulnerable for a while. And so I cannot honestly say that there was zero fear, of any kind in regards to the coronavirus. It was mostly on behalf of my husband, but I didn't have fear of my own biology. I did not have fear that this was somehow the apocalypse and the end of humanity, or the beginning of some totalitarian regime. So in that same year of 2020, I began a series on YouTube, which I am continuing at this point, called We Are Ascending. And my intention with that video series was to inform people, to share some of the information that I had received and give people a reason to believe that in spite of everything that was going on, it was actually good news. That actually what we were seeing was good news. And I got a few videos into that series up to the point where the next video I would have produced would have been all about our planet Gaia, including the timelines that I was given, that I received. Not the same timelines. I actually received multiple timelines. One of them being the Global Cycles and Global Consciousness program that comes from the System of Human Design, and another one being the process of ascension and the story of human ascension on this planet that is honestly one of the most beautiful things that I've ever heard in my entire life. And I really wholeheartedly believe that if more human beings would at least allow themselves to entertain the possibility of some of these concepts, that they would have more reasons to look out at the world, even with everything that seems to be going on, going wrong, all of the dirt that seems to be emerging from the shadows that we never saw before but suspected was there, and now we see it. It's actually good news, people. And it's taken me this long to complete that video because I realized it's so much information. It's so much information, and it tramples on well-accepted premises from all aspects of humanity, our history, our spiritual and religious beliefs, the things that we believe are acceptable, even if some people think that it's irrational and unscientific to believe that there is some sort of divinity on our planet and that we're part of it, in our universe, and that we're part of that. There are certain narrow confines of spiritual thought that are often thought of as acceptable. If you're practicing one of the traditional religions, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, to name a few, Hinduism even, and I know that there are more than that, as this is not a comprehensive list. It was just a listing of some examples of what we tend to accept when it comes to spiritual thought. But there's a much bigger picture going on. And so I found myself kind of stumbling on how do I present this information? First of all, it's massive. It's a huge amount of information from both of these different timelines that I want to share with you. But it's also that it's, to accept some of these premises means rejecting some very deeply entrenched notions of what acceptable spiritual thought is. And I found it to be daunting. And I've spent the last couple years actually putting it on the back burner of my consciousness and allowing myself to simply sort of chew on the possible ways that I might be able to express this to you. And so here I am. I've got the camera rolling, and I'm just going to try to talk to you. In a very natural way about some of the things that I think, if you were to include them in your worldview, would make you see things very, very differently. And so here we go. If you haven't watched the last video in this series, and particularly what I called a thought journey that I created called Zoom Out, I highly recommend that you go back and watch it. I had a lot of fun and was very inspired creating that particular aspect of the last portion of this video, which was meant to help you to expand your perception of yourself within this vast cosmos and open yourself up to a story, a beautiful story of what humanity is doing on this planet. Now, if you haven't watched it and you want to stick around and just follow me through, just understand that you might be missing some key pieces of the perspective that might be necessary for you to embrace some of these ideas. But I want to just start this by saying, any way you slice it, as far as I'm concerned, whether you're looking at it from a secular perspective or from a religious or spiritual perspective, our existence, the simple fact of our existence, is a miracle. It's incredible. I'm gonna actually let myself just go fluff for a second. I didn't prepare for a camera. So I'm just gonna go put on a couple pieces of jewelry and maybe a little lips so I don't feel so self-conscious that I don't look good on the camera, okay? All right, be right back. Okay, I'm back. I can feel a little better about my presentation during this video, and I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing with my hands, and I'm going to just see what comes out of my mouth as I tell you the story of this. This is the most beautiful story that I've ever heard. Okay. I am not a scientist. I am not an anthropologist. I have a bachelor's degree in sociology, and I have a number of certifications in the realm of holistics and body work. I was a yoga instructor, a body worker. I've done some NLP and coaching training. If you go to my website, benevolentconcepts.com or imaginegoodness.com, they will redirect to the same place. You can find on my About Me page a list of the various things that I've studied over the years, both formally and informally. But I want to just start this video by saying I am in no way claiming that anything that I am saying can be verified scientifically or through conventional ways of empirical knowing. And that's one of the reasons that I feel so compelled to share the story, is that the academics out there, the people that we usually turn to for knowledge, for facts and information, they don't have this story. And as much as I respect academia and I respect, historians and the processes that the scientific method has brought us that allow our empirical knowing to be based on methodology that we can trust and based on, just giving us findings that are actually meaningful, I am totally non-scientific about what I'm about to share with you in this video, and I want to be clear about that going into it. Because the last thing that I want is for anyone here to then, challenge me or ask me for proof of things. I do not have proof, but I have a story, and I'm pretty sure you've never heard it unless you already believe that it's the most beautiful thing you can ever imagine to be a human being on this amazing planet. So where to begin? Where to begin? Sometimes in my imagination, I like to begin with simply pointing out the fact that we exist on a planet that is orbiting around a ball of nuclear fusion that has not gone out in over 4.5 billion years. So let's just set the stage that way for now. A planet that is perfectly situated so that it is neither too close to this massive chemical reaction to evaporate all the oceans and burn up any potential life forms, nor is it too far such that the oceans would freeze and then life would be impossible. This is what is called the habitable zone. The habitable zone. It's the Goldilocks zone. And the fact that our planet exists in this habitable zone is the reason that life was possible in the first place. And so that's a good place to begin. Now, I'm struggling. I'm feeling really challenged here because I feel like I don't know how to bring these two things together in a way that will make sense to you without seeming to commit all kinds of logical fallacies and false equivalencies and certain leaps in logic that we're not accustomed to in our everyday discourse about our lives as humans on this planet. But I want to suggest to you at the outset of this discussion that not only is that ball of nuclear fusion conscious, that bright point of light in the middle of a sea of apparent blackness and nothing, that chemical reaction that shines so brightly that it is able to warm and illuminate every inch of our planet as it rotates on its axis, that it is actually a form of consciousness. And that so is our planet. And so here we are, we're venturing far from the realms of science and even conventional spiritual thinking. And I am proposing to you that our sun and our planet, and actually by extension, every atom and molecule in all of creation, is conscious and is an expression of consciousness. And so now we begin our exploration of our beautiful conscious planet Gaia, who has had an intention regarding life on the surface of her planet since she first began to coalesce from clouds of gas and dust and matter that were circling around the collapse of heavy atoms into a nuclear fusion reaction that eventually became our sun. So we're going back to the very impetus of our solar system, and I am suggesting to you that the only way that you can really reframe your understanding of what's happening right now is to go back to that inception point and even beyond it, and frame the entire thing as a deliberate exercise in consciousness. How's that? So at some point, our planet, it cooled, the crust formed, the atmosphere was not habitable for life for a very long time. In fact, Neil deGrasse Tyson picked up where Carl Sagan left off decades ago, and some years ago reproduced the program Cosmos with wonderful modern graphic and special effects. One of my favorite aspects of this program was that deGrasse Tyson was able to demonstrate to us that if the history of the Earth up until this point in time were imagined as a 12-month calendar, the beginning of human life on the planet occurred right around the stroke of midnight at the end of the year. And so, relatively speaking, human consciousness on this planet is a new thing. What if all that time Gaia was actually getting ready for us? I want you to just take a moment to imagine that the millions of years that this planet was rotating on its axis, orbiting around the sun, developing plant life, sea life, dinosaurs, everything in between, microbes, viruses, parasites, all kinds of life on this planet, that it was actually a part of getting the environment prepared perfectly to receive human consciousness. So again, I know this isn't very scientific. I'm asking you to open your imagination and to allow in a narrative that could influence you to perceive benevolence, positive possibilities, and even good news based on what you're seeing happening on our planet right now in the year 2022 and beyond. So our anthropological record shows that at some point in the development of life on this planet, there were actually many forms of humanoid, human-like life. Our immediate ancestors, such as Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon and these various forms of humanoid life that Gaia herself, where did they come from? These original forms of humanoid life on this planet, I would like to suggest, were a part of Gaia's early experiment of creating humanoid bodies that functioned well within her gravitational field and within her various environments. Anthropologists and scientists agree that what we now know as Homo sapiens is sort of a whittling down of several forms of humanoid species that at one point coexisted on this planet. And now we have only one, what we call Homo sapiens. Why? Well, if you're willing to imagine that not only are our sun and our planet conscious, but that they've been preparing the environment for an experiment of human consciousness to eventually unfold on the planet, then maybe you're willing to entertain the possibility that that whittling down was also a conscious act. Now, I'm not here to argue creationism or evolution with you, because actually I believe that they are both right. I believe that there is a natural process of evolution, and I also believe that consciousness intervenes and makes certain choices along the way. So here's where we gotta get way out there, people. Remember I mentioned to you that our ball of nuclear fusion that we call the sun has been doing its thing for over 4.5 billion years? Well, when we look up at the night sky, it's easy to see that our sun is not the only one. And actually, recently, scientists used AI to discover many, many, many Earth-like planets in habitable zones all throughout our galaxy. And that was just our galaxy. And so I would like to invite you to consider that our human life, our consciousness on this planet, is not as unique in our galaxy or even beyond as we have historically believed it to be. If you believe that life on this planet was made possible by our sun and the perfect proximity of our planet, such that our waters, our oceans neither boiled nor froze, then I implore you to explore the possibility in your mind and your imagination that similar processes have unfolded on other planets. What if one or another of those planets actually evolved and developed more quickly than we did? Are you ready? According to anthropologists, somewhere around 200,000 years ago, the fossil record shows that humanoid life on this planet was reduced from several forms down to just one. Not only that, at that point in time, our chromosomes went from 24 to 23 in a process of telomere to telomere fusion, which is not thought to have been able to unfold naturally without intervention. I want you to chew on that for a second, because I'm not a scientist, but this information is available via people who use the scientific method to investigate our history on this planet. I find this idea to be very exciting. It seems to me to be a cognitive link between our empirical means of knowing, like science, and the information that I've received from these other non-empirical sources. What if 200,000 years ago, a distant civilization that recognized the potential for the development of consciousness that we now know as human consciousness to develop on this planet, and they came here purposefully to help facilitate that process? Could that help to explain the sudden shift from multiple humanoid forms down to a single one, as well as the chromosomal change that gave us our unique human DNA? Now, if you're still with me and you're not clicking away, and you haven't decided that I'm just a crazy person talking nonsense here, I want to tell you the story that I heard about a civilization from a distant star system that had somehow overcome their own challenges on their planet, including violence and war and the ability to destroy themselves, and who felt a divine calling to go and facilitate the process of consciousness awakening on another planet, namely ours. This is the story of the 26,000-year precession of the equinoxes, including the tale of Lemuria and the very deliberate plan to give humanity a long stretch of time in which we had the chance to solve our problems, to decide that violence isn't the answer, and to eventually initiate an unprecedented and completely gorgeous, stunning, inspiring, mind-blowing process on this planet that only began once that 26,000-year cycle had completed in the year 2012. That's right, the year that horrible disaster films were made about, the year where people were expecting calamity and disaster and the end of all things, was actually only ever meant to be the start of something new. And by the end of this video, I am hoping that I've convinced you to at least entertain the possibility that some of the things that we're seeing are indications that we have actually fully entered that something new. So the specific civilization that I want to reference are the Pleiadians, who come from a constellation that is known on this planet by many different civilizations as the Seven Sisters. The Pleiadians are by no means the only extraterrestrial entities who have visited our planet, but they are the only ones who have been given free license to, I will use the word meddle, I prefer the word participate. Going back to that recent discovery of all of these Earth-like planets by scientists who used AI and are still using the AI to actually scan them and see which ones are most likely to have life that might be deemed intelligent, we have to assume that this universe, our galaxy, with processes similar to ours where life is able to develop, where something like photosynthesis is possible and the light from a neighboring star can actually jumpstart organisms and entire ecosystems on a planet, that some process like that is also happening on other planets. And just a few minutes ago, I asked you to entertain the possibility that some other planets got there before we did. So basically, I want to present to you the idea that our universe is teeming with life, that there are all kinds of life forms, ones that we can't yet imagine, and life forms that we might not even consider to be life because they're so foreign from our own experience. But I also want to suggest to you that there are other forms of life out there that are humanoid, and that the humanoid type of life form represents a specific experiment within the entirety of creation, namely, that the conscious, intelligent, creative energy of the cosmos, that we sometimes call God, wanted to enter into bodies and walk around on these worlds that it had created. I don't know, if you go watch my thought journey, Zoom Out, I sort of help to prime your imagination for this possibility, that the only reason that we would exist on this planet at all, in the midst of all possibilities of all space and time, is that the universe wanted to experience itself walking around and doing things in worlds that it created. We don't have to look far in our culture to see examples that we enjoy doing this, and we are necessarily expressions of this universe. And so I just want to suggest and imply and invite you to consider the possibility that our consciousness, our intelligence, our desire, and the way that we approach life, that it's actually an extension of the universe itself and the entity and consciousness that we often refer to as God. And so all of these planets, there are all kinds of life. Some of them are meant to more be energy balancers, like the life in the oceans, the algae, the trees, the plants, even the animals. They're here to provide a balance, and they don't have the full capacity for free choice and for deliberate creation that is represented by human consciousness or humanoid consciousness, such as the Pleiadians. And so 200,000 years ago, when our fossil record suddenly shifts in a way that scientists are still puzzled about because it doesn't seem to be representative of a natural process of DNA evolution, I want to propose to you that one of those planets that housed a humanoid life form that represented God consciousness, choosing to enter bodies and walk around and have experiences, chose to come to our planet to help Gaia to facilitate a similar process. This is so exciting to me, guys, because there are several things that I heard and read that these beings did when they came to our planet to help us to get ready. And some of those things done so long ago are absolutely relevant to what we're seeing in terms of the seeming proliferation of bad news on our planet. So let's imagine these beings come to our planet and they see multiple different forms of life. I'm shaking my head because as I'm speaking this out loud, I'm realizing that there are so many other pieces that it's really challenging for me to try to weave in here, because I have to make so many of those leaps and I have to ask you to entertain ideas that are really unconventional, such as the idea that there might be a form of consciousness in the universe that actually goes about creating magnetic grids on these Earth-like planets, inhabitable zones, the magnetic grid becoming the engine of helping the evolution of DNA to awaken more consciousness in the humanoid bodies. Some of these concepts are so big, and I don't expect you to be digesting them all. I have read something like 12, 13 books in the last few years about this subject specifically, and sometimes I forget all of the information that I've absorbed, and it only comes back to me when I start talking about it like this. So these beings from another planet, they were also assisted by non-physical consciousnesses. One of these consciousnesses refers to itself as Cryon, or has at least come to humanity and said, hey, you can call me Cryon. Cryon claims that they came here as the Earth was forming and set up 3 basic grids on this planet. One being the magnetic grid, the other being the crystalline grid, and the other being the Gaia grid. Now, some form of grid existed on Gaia prior to Cryon and the Pleiadians coming here to upgrade our planet to get ready for us, but these grids have to do with the development of humanoid consciousness, God consciousness in a physical body. And so it's actually a deliberate process by which a magnetic grid is established on a planet. So the magnetic grid was established, the crystalline grid was established, the Gaia grid was established, and each of these has a different function for the development of consciousness on our planet. The magnetic grid, as I mentioned, is primarily responsible for delivering information to the DNA structure of the human being from the various energy sources, such as our sun, that are portals to other dimensions where consciousness is shining through and informing the development of life on this planet. My gosh, you guys, I'm amazed if you're still here with me, because saying these things out loud, I feel like a crazy person because nobody talks like this. But this is the information that I've received. And as I keep going, I hope that you are just as excited about the possibility of it, because even if you're only looking at this from a spiritual perspective and saying, maybe this is a new spiritual story, I'm pretty sure that this story is way better, more inspiring, more grand and magnificent, something that is worth believing in than any story I have yet to hear from any of the religions on our planet. So here we are, a conscious sun, a conscious planet, conscious entities that set up grids on the planet that support life, and beings that come from another star system who have already gone through their own history of almost destroying themselves, having war and genocide, but somehow surviving it and getting to the other side and having a peaceful civilization, and then choosing to come to Earth to help create that here. So the magnetic grid helps support the life on the planet through the DNA. The crystalline grid is like a crystalline structure embedded in the earth, in her minerals, in her rocks, in her crystals, in her core, that is a memory of the planet. It is a memory that holds the vibration of the experiences that the humanoid beings on the planet are having. What are they choosing to do with their creative consciousness on the planet? Well, this crystalline grid was created to remember that and hold the frequency of the planet. So when people talk about hauntings, haunted houses, going to battlefields and being able to feel the energy or even hear the screams of the soldiers that, died and were injured there, this is what they're referring to. They're talking about the crystalline grid. Now, I've got some really exciting information about the crystalline grid, which I want to tell you later. But for now, suffice it to say that this is the function of this grid. It is an energetic memory of the planet, such that the impressions of experiences that the conscious beings on the planet have are then stored in this crystalline grid and remembered by the planet. Now, the third grid is known as the Gaia grid. And this is the ancestral grid. This is one of my favorite grids. Just my mind having this concept to play with. Just the possibility of its existence is so exciting to my mind. I love to think about the ancestral grid, because what it means is that every time that a human enters a body on this planet and then leave the body, there is a piece of their consciousness retaining the highest aspects of their memory of what they experienced as a human being that becomes embedded in the planet. It becomes a part of the planet. That person's soul or consciousness, or however you like to, conceive of their greater spiritual entity, isn't confined. It doesn't become trapped in this ancestral grid. It's literally like leaving behind a computer chip that then becomes a part of the greater program of the planet. So when these three grids are looked at together, we see that there is a crystalline grid that is remembering the vibration of the experiences. So that could be a horrible experience like a war, and the planet is remembering the vibration of war. But then there is an ancestral grid where the higher learning, the lessons that the person as a human maybe didn't learn while they were in their body, but now that they've left their body and they can look back on all of it, they go, oh, duh, could have chosen that. Might have wanted to do that instead. Probably preferred that. That learning, those lessons, that wisdom becomes a part of the planet, almost as a counterbalance to whatever is left behind in the crystalline grid. So these two potentials are left here for humans in our lifetimes to connect to if we choose to. And so we can be more in tune with what we're feeling as the planet is remembering what we've done before, or through rituals such as our wonderful indigenous rituals from around the planet, where these peoples have the wisdom to call upon their ancestors. We can also call in what was learned from the negative experience that the planet is remembering, and we can be guided to ways to actually clear and heal and rectify that energy. But there's even more exciting information about the crystalline grid that is coming up later in this video, so stay tuned for that. But we have those two grids in conjunction with a magnetic grid that is then also delivering the higher evolutionary frequencies directly to the DNA, so that our DNA is being informed as to the direction of the evolution of our very biological vehicles on this planet and what they support our consciousness to do. And what do I mean by that? What they support our consciousness to do? Well, many neuroscientists, for example, are convinced that structures such as the amygdala in our brain are mostly designed to process stress. Well, what if that is only one possible setting that's been programmed into our DNA? And what if part of our evolutionary potential is actually to program our amygdala to process energies like compassion? That's just one simple example. And I've always been intending to talk more about the DNA and the magnetic grid and what is happening with our physical bodies in the next video of this series, which I intended to call The Throne, our physical bodies being the throne that our divine consciousness sits in while we're on this planet. But more on that later. Okay. So things are starting to get even more exciting to me. I'm sure you can tell by the look on my face, because I'm about to tell you two of my favorite parts of this story. And one is that when the Pleiadians came here with the intent of helping to prepare Gaia and her humanoid life forms to actually receive divine consciousness and to allow that divine consciousness to develop and unfold on this planet, one of the things that they did is that they embedded into Gaia 24 time capsules. These time capsules are also known as nodes and nulls. And so when the Pleiadians embedded these time capsules into various sites around the planet, there is a map of the 24 points on this planet where these time capsules were embedded. And ultimately, the 24 points are 12 sets of 2. They are pairs of a node and a null. Right now, off the top of my head, I'm forgetting which one is which, but one of them is designed to push dark consciousness out of its hiding places. It's literally a mechanism to clean. And so, of these pairs of nodes and nulls, one is pushing the negative out and cleaning it, literally cleaning the negative dark energy, those memories in the crystalline grid, the battlefields. That's what it's designed to do, is to release that old energy so that new energy can be imprinted into the crystalline grid at the behest of the consciousness of the humans on the planet. The other time capsule allows for higher consciousness to be pumped into the planet, into the atmosphere, into the various grids, and made available to humanity. And so these are things like ideas for new inventions. Because remember, I mentioned that the Pleiadians, they've already gone through their entire history of being prehistoric, developing civilization, having technology and the capacity to destroy themselves, having wars, having genocide, but overcoming that and becoming a peaceful planet to the point where they then chose to travel to another planet, our Earth, to help facilitate a similar process. And so they have energy solutions. They have systems of government, systems of finance. They have intergalactic travel technology, just to name a few. And it's not necessarily that their specific patented inventions are being pushed into human consciousness. It's the thought forms that support the development of humanity's own brand of these same solutions for our energy, for our waste, for our governments and our organization of society, and for our travel throughout the cosmos, which of course we want to do, right? I guess that I've done a good enough job to transmit to you some of my excitement over what these nodes and these nulls represent. So the Pleiadians came here over 200,000 years ago, helping to prepare our planet for a 26,000 year experiment. And part of what they did was, at the beginning, they set up these time capsules, these nodes and nulls, so that if humanity got to the end of this 26,000 years and we did not destroy ourselves, the time capsules would be released. And what was the ultimate date when that 26,000 year cycle ended? Well, the Mayans had been telling us about it for ages. It was the year 2012. So rather than having an end of the world scenario, the Mayan calendar was actually like a long timer that was counting down this 26,000 years of this experiment to see, when initiated with benevolent intent by both the planet and her consciousness, helpful entities from the cosmos that don't inhabit physical bodies, as well as members from an advanced civilization that had somehow survived the urge and the impulse to destroy itself, came here to set up this experiment, what would happen by the time we got to 2012. And if we could somehow survive that, then all of this helpful energy would be released onto our planet. You guys, this is so exciting! I can't wait to tell you more about what actually happened once we reached 2012 and what it means for our current phase of human history and beyond. But I want to take this moment now to tell you the next thing that these Pleiadian visitors did to help our planet to prepare for this 26,000 year experiment of consciousness. Now, here's where I just began to melt as I received this story and so many of the hard edges of our planet's current religious thought, as well as our secular and scientific thought about our existence happening within a somewhat harsh and unforgiving cosmos, where we are minuscule and unsupported and seemingly randomly existing here as either a collision of atoms and molecules that happened to create human life, or as a species of flawed and imperfect individuals that need to somehow prove or earn support and love from the universe. Because, my friends, I want to tell you that at this point in time, I'm pretty convinced that neither of those things actually represent the truth. So now it's time to talk about Lemuria. So you might be thinking that 200,000 years ago is a long time compared to this 26,000 year cycle. And you might be wondering, what are some of the other things that happened in between that 200,000 years ago point when the Pleiadians came? They started to whittle down our DNA. Okay, I gotta circle back. Let's talk about the DNA. Okay. So now we've got all these entities who've been helping to prepare our beautiful planet for a human civilization to emerge and to develop. So, in addition to installing these time capsules into our planet that would be released if we passed the 2012 marker and didn't destroy ourselves, the Pleiadians helped to whittle down the various forms of humanoid life into one. And not only that, they embedded within the eventual Homo sapien DNA that we all carry at this point in time a very special feature. Now, I'm going to talk more about this feature in the next video, which is on the throne of our human body, which is the seat of our divine consciousness while we're in these lifetimes. But I do want to touch on it here because I also find this to be very beautiful. I am not a geneticist, but I have studied systems such as human design and the gene keys, which give a basic overview of the structure of DNA and some of the scientific discoveries of recent decades. Now, scientists are discovering more and more about DNA all the time, and I don't pretend to have the technical or scientific understanding to really be able to decipher what they're saying. So take this with a grain of salt. But what I do know is that geneticists are aware that there is an apparent telomere to telomere fusion of the second chromosome in the human genome. This telomere to telomere fusion is thought to require a very long period of time in order to be completed in a natural fashion, meaning purely through scientific evolutionary processes. And so the existence of this fusion is actually very contentious in the scientific community because nobody really knows how it happened, why it happened, what it means. But what they do know is that our genome it seems to be designer, and it is unique on our planet. None of our primate relatives have anything similar to our 23 sets of chromosomes. Now, according to both this ascension information that I've received, mostly from Lee Carroll and Cryon, but also the systems of human design and the gene keys, the second chromosome is very special. And what this chromosome did, what the Pleiadians actually did, and they did this through a natural biological process of basically breeding with their chosen humanoid form on this planet. As they were sort of culling, it might sound horrible, but it had this big picture in mind, which I hope that we can find some gentleness around this, because the idea was to allow God consciousness to inhabit a singular form on this planet. And that's what this telomere to telomere fusion of the second chromosome did. Basically, what this did was it linked what had previously been purely biological, a structure of biology with its own instructions that allowed itself to evolve and replicate itself on the planet, was now connected, are you ready, to a soul. So the Pleiadians came here. They embedded time capsules into the planet. They bred with us on purpose to give us this fused second chromosome and transform us from simple biological creatures roaming around a garden into divine beings that contained the power of free choice as bestowed by connection to a soul, which is nothing less than a piece of God. So if you're following me so far, we have a conscious cosmos that is conducting grand experiments all throughout our galaxy and beyond. And now here we are, these beings transformed the Garden of Eden of planet Earth into an experimental ground where divine beings got to exercise free choice. Now, it's time to talk about Lemuria. Because you might think that it would still be cruel for these beings to come, set up the planet, change our DNA, and then vanish and leave us here with no instructions. And I would agree with you, except for the fact that there are myths and legends of this fabled continent of Mu, or Lemuria, from multiple places on our planet. And from what I understand, from what I've absorbed and read, Lemuria was the place where these Pleiadian beings spent 50,000 years training humanity how to utilize the laws of the universe and their consciousness to create on planet Earth. So much for a cruel, uncaring cosmos. So much for random processes of life that don't have any care or thought for who we actually are. The story of Lemuria is that when the Pleiadians were approaching planet Earth 200-ish thousand years ago with their craft and their ships, that at that point in time, there was a massive magma bubble that had pushed up what we now consider to be the Hawaiian Islands into a massive mountain range and a mini continent that was mostly isolated from all other land masses on planet Earth. And since some of their technologies and their processes, such as rejuvenating the human body, which I will talk about more in the next video, required cold temperatures, they saw this high mountain range as the ideal place to land, and the people that inhabited the various valleys and beaches and areas on this mini continent as the ideal ones to be the first participants in their experimentation. And so then they established this continent, these various societies that were interrelated, but often sometimes tribally separate also, from what I understand. They established Lemuria. And Lemuria was a place, bear with me here because again, I'm going to stretch your spiritual imagination. The idea was that each human soul who had a lifetime in Lemuria had only one lifetime, and that it was a very, very long lifetime. So you know how in the Bible there are these stories of people living to be 800 years? That was real. And our Lemurian lifetimes were that long. They were about 1,000 years. And in that time, we participated in learning, in rituals, in ceremonies, in cultivation of the earth, connection to the elementals that basically instilled in our DNA and placed into our Akashic record, which is stored in the DNA, a potential memory that could be drawn upon by any and all future humans who had the same DNA, because we all do, a memory of what it meant to live in harmony with the planet, to live in harmony with the higher forces of physics and the joining of physics and consciousness that allowed us to live longer lives and to have access to abundance. Now, back then, life was much more simple. We did not have the trappings of our modern society. This was a much more simple version of civilization and of, you know, what we might think of as government. And the science that they used was different than what we consider today to be science and technology with all of our devices. But still, the basic fundamental principles that are the fractal basis of expanding into systems of more complexity were implanted and instilled in the human genetic inheritance, in our genetic memory, through this 50,000 year process of these Pleiadian teachers helping humanity to understand what it meant to be divine beings in our body. And then after about 50,000 years, where all of these human souls came through and lived a singular, long lifetime of really repeating and practicing and living these principles, that magma bubble that was under the Hawaiian Islands gradually sunk And as they sunk, the people of Lemuria dispersed to all corners of the world, which signaled the end of that stage in the process and the beginning of the 26,000-year test of consciousness. And so at that point, human beings plummeted into lower states of consciousness very deliberately in order to induce a state of forgetfulness that was necessary to remove the bias of a divine being who knows that they're a divine being, who is always going to choose beatific and divine things, so that free choice, the experiment of free choice, could unfold on this planet within this 26,000-year period. The only way that a being can truly have free choice is if they remove the bias that lets them know that their true identity is one that's always going to choose love. Humanity was given the full palette of all of the colors, from black and puke green and doo-doo brown to pastel and all of the most gorgeous colors that you can imagine. If you think of the settings on your photo app on your phone, where you can adjust the contrast and the brightness and the saturation, human beings have access to all of those settings. And free choice is our ability to decide what is the combination of contrast and saturation and color versus shadow that pleases us most. And this 26,000 years was literally giving us free rein to decide whether we wanted to choose freely, without bias, to elevate, to continue to evolve as a conscious choice and not simply a process of nature. Did we want to choose to evolve our human consciousness, our human relationships and civilization, so that once we got to this 26,000-year marker, we opened the door to something new beyond that? Or did we just want to putz around and do whatever we want and eventually destroy ourselves? And I really, really love to contemplate the idea that we didn't really care either way. Because that's the only way that our choice could really be free, is if it were freely given to us and there were no expectation as to what we actually chose. Now I want to get more into this concept of what it would mean for divine beings to come to a planet and even be okay if we had destroyed ourselves in a later video that I intend to call the crown of our divinity that we wear, and our access to that full divine consciousness on this planet and the implications and the ramifications of that. But for now, suffice it to say that these Pleiadian visitors came to our planet and prepared both Gaia and humanoid beings and our consciousness via breeding with us to give us divinity right into our DNA, and then training us to use that DNA for 50,000 years in the civilization of Lemuria. And then we all decided to forget, to get amnesia, and to come play the game and see what we chose. And so here we are in 2022, and we already know that we have far outlived the predictions that, the year 2000 and Y2K was going to be the end of the world. That didn't happen. And then the erroneous belief that the Mayan calendar had been pointing to an end of the world in the year 2012, because that's never what that calendar was about. It was the timer for the 26,000-year experiment. So now that we're beyond that, you might be asking yourself, well, how does a war in Ukraine, a coronavirus pandemic, monkeypox, and all the other shenanigans that we've been seeing, such as an attempted coup in the United States and all kinds of horrible things unfolding online and in the media, how does that equate to humanity evolving past destroying itself and opening the door into greater evolution? Well, here we have to come back to those nodes and those nulls that I mentioned before. So when we crossed the marker in the year 2000, it initiated the powering up of these 24 nodes and nulls, or 12 matched pairs. And the information that I've received is that gradually between the year 2012 and the winter of 2019, these pairs of nodes and nulls powered up one pair at a time until, get this, winter of 2019, the final pair of nodes and nulls were matched and activated on this planet. So what does that mean? In 2019, right before the coronavirus pandemic, friends, these pairs of energy points that had been embedded in the planet to awaken once we completed that experiment of 26,000 years started to clean the darkness. And what does that mean? It means, my friends, have you ever gone to clean something and you thought it was dirty before you started cleaning it? But as soon as you put some water and some soap on it, it seemed like dirt was just coming out of everywhere. And it looked dirtier than before. I know that we've all had this experience with one thing or another in our lifetimes, and that is exactly what's happening. Now keep in mind, this process just kicked into full gear in the winter of 2019. And what did we see? We saw ill intentions and ulterior motives and deception and pathogen and contagion seemingly pushed out of hiding places, things that we didn't know were going on. So we saw all these things get pushed out of their seeming hiding places to the point where people were forced to hide out in their own homes because it was so dirty out there. And from that point forward, I think that most of us can agree that there's been a steady stream of just crud kind of emerging out of nooks and crannies and crevices and dark hiding places, conspiracy theories right alongside real world events that have no seeming explanation and seem to reflect a dark side of humanity. They seem to reflect the lower aspects of human nature and put a lot of us into states of fear, panic, distrust, and conflict with one another. Friends, what if this is a literal three-dimensional manifestation of that metaphor that I just gave you a few moments ago, of starting to clean something that you knew it was dirty, but you start cleaning it and you start to see just how dirty it was. That's what's happening. And friends, it's right on time. And what's exciting is that if we really see this as a manifestation of our crystalline grid of this planet starting to get cleaned, it means that the resonance that used to hold us down, that used to make it difficult for us to achieve escape velocity from our own negative patterns and from the lower aspects of what we have thought of as human nature up to this point, the grip and the gravity of those energies is starting to release us so that we can gradually rise. But simultaneously, there is this appearance, the sudden appearance of all the previously hidden dirt that is emerging for all of us to see. Now, I'm not going to pretend like it's easy to see the dirt, because this is our humanity that's being reflected to us. This is violence and neglect and carelessness. This is a growing awareness of the ways that we have disrespected our planet, of the ways that we've conceived of ourselves as living in nature, but not being a part of nature, as somehow living in a global human community, but not really being a part of that integral human community. I know you know what I mean. It's not easy to look out into the world and to see the dirt right in front of our eyes. But I'd like you just to consider for a moment that this is all happening in these recent years to seemingly unprecedented degrees, meaning it's coming at us from all directions. because our crystalline grid is being cleaned, and soon we will have a planet that is ready to support us in the higher intentions that we choose. Now, how do I know that humanity is actually more ready than it may appear to be to choose higher intentions? It's simple. If something doesn't bother you, you don't get upset about it. So the fact that we have so many people around the globe who are legitimately upset by war, by the prospect that we've destroyed our planet and that global warming is irreversible, by the prospect of corruption and chaos in our governments and our inability to trust the institutions that are meant to support us. If people weren't upset, it would imply that we're just okay with it, that that's just who we think we are, and that's what we expect from life, is for things to be really crappy. It's good news that people are upset, because it means that they're aware that they want something else. Now, part of the reason that we collectively have not allowed ourselves to really entertain what it is that we actually want instead of what we've had, things like war, chaos, corrupt government, etc., lower aspects of human nature, is because our crystalline grid was remembering our previous choices and it was holding us in the old patterns, but that is dispersing. Now, simultaneously, what's really exciting to me is that this is one aspect of those matched energy portals, the time capsules in the planet, is the cleaning. The other aspect is the pushing and the flooding of the new ideas, the possibilities, the templates, and the thought forms that support the solutions that we need being pumped into the planet. And any time that we choose to quiet our conscious mind and open ourselves more to the universal mind, we have the ability to receive, as individual people, the templates, the inspiration, the impulses to take the actions that put one foot in front of the other, that bring the synchronicity of all of the people and the elements that are necessary to bring about the solutions that we need. These processes are happening simultaneously. The dirt is being pushed out, and yeah, we're seeing it. It's ugly. But if we could see that as necessary, you know, if we follow our house cleaner around when they're cleaning our home, and we pay attention to all of the dirt that they get to come out of the nooks and crannies and crevices, we might find ourselves being very upset. But if we just know, if we let them finish their process, pretty soon we're going to have a clean house, then we can be a lot more relaxed. And so part of my reason for telling you this story in the first place is to help you realize that the cleaning crew is here. And that's why things look so dirty and chaotic. And so let's just sit back and allow that part to do its job. And then we can tune in with our peaceful mind and our peaceful consciousness to this other aspect that is actually supporting and promoting us to find the solutions that we need for our planet. Inventions regarding energy, waste management, freeing us from our dependence on the fossil fuels that we know pollute our environment and are really bad for the longevity of our species on this planet. Because I think that we all know that Earth herself is going to be fine. She could unleash her plasma. She could create tsunamis that basically wipe human life off of this planet, and she has the ability, we know from the historical, anthropological, geological record of the planet, she can renew herself. The Earth will be fine. It's humans that we sometimes get worried about. Well, my friends, if we let the Earth be cleaned, and we don't micromanage and try to follow the cleaning crew around as they do that process too much, and we tune in to this other aspect of consciousness that is awakening for the first time on this planet, bringing us thought forms, inspiration, visions that will bring us to the next stages of what we really want. And we know we want it because we're upset about what we have, which looks like crap. So we know we want the good things. This other process is happening simultaneously. And all we need to do is release our attachment to the old vibrations, the old frequencies of fear and survival and doubt and distrust and conflict. Let that be cleaned away and tune into this process of higher consciousness coming to the planet. The vibration of the planet herself is rising for the first time since the dawn of human history, as all of those old memories and energies are being cleansed. The vibration of the dirt and the rocks of the planet is literally elevating and simultaneously coming to support the higher potentials of our DNA to be expressed by us as we receive these thought forms that inspire us to new inventions to solve our problems on this planet. Can you see why I think it's all good news? Now, if you've made it this far in this video, I'm assuming that you don't think these things that I'm saying are absolute BS. I wonder if you've really allowed them to land. Of all the stories that are playing out in your mind, as you witness life unfolding on the world stage and in your personal experience, the myths, the religious stories, your favorite childhood fiction, science, philosophy, whatever it is, as all of these various overlapping patterns impress upon you some sort of meaning as to what is happening on this planet. Do you prefer your default stories, a narrative that you're telling yourself about what's happening? Or do you prefer something like what I just told you? Would you prefer, without any true evidence or any way of knowing what's actually going to happen to us in our future, because we don't, would you prefer to imagine the worst? Or would you prefer to imagine something gorgeously, stunningly beautiful, such as a conscious sun, a conscious planet, a galaxy teeming with life in which advanced extraterrestrial beings who had managed to survive and create a peaceful society actually came here, gave us divinity into our own cells, and prepared our human consciousness and our planet for a massive long-term experiment that we have just successfully completed? I would like for you to choose, and I need to give you a little bit more information that might help you to make that choice. So you might be asking, all right, so, is there an end to this cleaning process? Is it ever going to be over? And is the earth ever going to appear to be clean? And I have two answers for you. One is yes, and one is no. I'm going to cover the no first, because basically, since we are a planet of free choice, the choice of war, conflict, and low consciousness is always going to be available to us. That palette, that artist's palette that includes all the dark, gross colors and all the beautiful, beatific, bright, pastel, and rich colors and everything in between, that is our human birthright. That is not ever going to be taken away from us. If someone were to take away the option of the lower choices, we would no longer have free choice. So we have to allow for the entirety of what is possible for humanity to choose to be on the table. And that includes things like war And that is why, even though we have a war that is unfolding on our planet right now, this war in Ukraine, I still believe that this story that I've been told about our having survived the impulse to destroy ourselves is true. There will always be the potential for conflict. But what I've been told is that there will never again be a world war. There will never again, if this story has any credence to it, there will never again be a world war on this planet. No World War III. Small conflicts happening around the globe, pockets of humanity getting drawn into things that need to be resolved for us to move forward into the future. Israel, Ukraine, Palestine. Yes. Yeah. Yep. And basically, for as long as humanity is on this planet, we need to understand that what it means to be divine beings with free will means the entire palette needs to be available to us, and that includes the potential for conflict and violence, but not on a global scale. And so let me now examine the yes answer that I gave to that question as to whether the earth will ever be clean. It is my understanding. I want to give you 2 time frames. One, if you think about this cleaning process as we are achieving escape velocity from the old lower vibrations, the planet is being cleaned and it's releasing us from the hold of these lower vibrations. And so just like in a science fiction movie where the astronauts are in their craft and they're exiting the atmosphere and they're all white-knuckled and pressed back into their seats from the G-forces. That's where we're at right now. I know these are sort of overlapping analogies. They're not perfect. They're not going to match up perfectly. The planet is being cleaned. There's a cleaning crew here, and our human consciousness, our human bodies, our awareness of what's possible to us are currently going through a process of moving through the G-forces as we escape the old gravitational pull of the patterns that we're releasing and being released from. And so this white knuckle experience of like, oh, hold on, we just gotta make it through. As far as I understand, that's gonna take us somewhere into the 2030s. I don't have an exact date for you. None of these are actually exact dates in the way that a sunrise or a sunset does have an exact moment when the sun is either appearing above the horizon or disappearing below the horizon. But the light show, it starts way before and lasts way after that moment where the sun emerges or descends below the horizon. These dates, December 21st, 2012, and another date that I'm going to give you in my next video where I give you the timeline of the human design system and the global cycles, which is sometime in February of 2027, they are like the sun moving past that point of the horizon, but the entire event has this sort of penumbra that exceeds it on either side. And so somewhere in the 2030s, it's likely that we will finally be past this initial stage of turbulence. And even beyond that point, that full palette is going to be available to us. We're going to have the ability to still choose the lower vibrations, but since the planet is no longer holding us down, we will be a lot less likely, and I don't believe it will happen, to get into a global conflict such as World War III, where we have the potential to destroy ourselves en masse. Okay. Now, the second timeline that I want to give you is for the full ascension process, which I'm going to explain to you more as we move through these videos, my current understanding of it, which again, it's the most beautiful story that I've ever heard. And if you've liked what I've said so far, I believe that you will like some of the other things that I will have to say. So what is the full process of humanity getting from where we are now to the point where the Pleiadians were at when they came here over 200,000 years ago and helped to initiate the process of consciousness on this planet. Well, from what I understand, that process will take us about 1,000 years. And so from 2012 to 3012, this will be the story of humanity's ascension. And just like so many of the epic space sagas that we have, Star Wars and Foundation and these galaxy-spanning stories of generations and generations of people unfolding on planets, there will be different phases of this 1,000-year process. There may be phases where we are in sort of a honeymoon phase or a Camelot on the planet and we think we're out of the woods. And then suddenly more darkness that is ready to be cleared emerges. It's like you can imagine these nodes and nulls, they will be firing and cleaning and pumping in the consciousness to the planet for the next 1,000 years to help elevate the entire frequency of the planet to support higher consciousness on the planet. And that goes along simultaneously with our DNA increasing its capacity, which I'm going to speak about again more in another video, so that the actual physical structure of our planet and of our bodies is able to hold higher intentions, which are higher vibrations, which is more energy. So that process is going to take about 1,000 years. And so there's really no ability for us to become attached to seeing the entire process through. We have to just sort of take that on a little bit of faith. But I think that the rest of the information and the timing of the coronavirus pandemic, which coincided perfectly with all of the nodes and the nulls of the planet finally coming online and starting to clean the grids of the planet, is perhaps enough contemporaneous, I wouldn't call it evidence, but these are things to observe in our environment and ask yourself, how do you prefer to interpret what's happening on this planet right now? Would you like to continue in your default way of imagining that, maybe there's nothing beautiful that is supporting or looking out for humanity? Or if there is something looking out for humanity, it's sitting out there with its arms crossed like, God, you guys really screwed it up, didn't ya? Right? Would you prefer those types of perceptual frameworks for interpreting the data of your experience? Or would you prefer to at least sometimes come with me into this little world where I envision that we exist in a conscious matrix of energy that has been joyfully and playfully planning an experiment of consciousness, creative consciousness on this planet, including putting in place these very loving and supportive setups within our planet, within our bodies, within our own consciousness, so that if we chose, through true free choice, which is the only kind of choice that I have any interest in believing in, we could choose something grand and beautiful to evolve into a peaceful species on this planet with the potential and the possibility of then journeying to another planet and assisting the process of life there. Thank you so much for joining me. I have been wanting to express these ideas for quite some time, and I'd started to question whether I would be able to do it. I did this totally stream of consciousness with no notes, and I'm actually really pleased with how it came out. So again, thanks for joining me. I hope that you have some more information to chew on, and I'm going to post some links to resources where you can go and explore some of the sources of information for this crazy story, crazy, beautiful, gorgeous, magnificent story, if you're interested in finding out more for yourself. So In my next video, I want to present to you yet another timeline, one that I think can lend even more insight into what is happening socially in the process of human consciousness on this planet. And that is the concept of the global consciousness program and global cycles as I learned it from the system of human design. So I don't know when that video is going to be ready, but it's coming. So stay tuned and I'll see you next time.